Sandro Botticelli was an Italian painter of the early Renaissance. He was born in Florence as Alessandro di Mariano di Vanni Filippetti around 1445. Most of his art was commissioned religious work, frequently of Madonna and Child, which he often painted in the round shape. But he is most famous for the mythological paintings like Primavera and The Birth of Venus, both currently located in Uffizi in Florence. Unlike other Renaissance artists, such as Leonardo and Michelangelo, he was less interested in accurate human anatomy, perspective, and landscape. His approach was more mannered as he moved away from the high Renaissance technique and somewhat further towards a more Gothic style. He was initially trained as a goldsmith, and it is believed he started his training at 14 years of age. He lived most of his life in the same neighborhood in Florence, with a short time spent in Rome. A famous neighbor of his was Americo Vespucci, after whom America is named, and the Vespucci family became regular patrons and also connected him with the famous Medici family, especially Cosimo Medici and his grandson Lorenzo the Magnificent. Their protection and influence had a significant importance not only on Botticelli, but also on many contemporary Italian scholars and artists of their days. Botticelli learned the style and technique from Fra Filippo Lippi, a Florentine painter almost 40 years his senior, who taught him to avoid shortcuts and follow the proper procedures, so that now Botticelli's paintings are very well preserved for their age. Another person of great influence in the artist's life was a Dominican friar, Girolamo Savonarola, who criticized Renaissance and the return to antiquity, which he saw as responsible for all Christianity's ills. His ideas greatly shook Botticelli, who, despite his devotion to and support from the Medici family, he abandoned mythological themes and devoted himself exclusively to religious works in the last 20 years of his life. Primavera is one of the several monumental mythological subjects commissioned by Lorenzo de' Medici. It conforms to no known story, and it's described as an allegory of spring. Botticelli displays a great sense of composition and narration with rich details, where grace and rhythm are more important than the accuracy of the scene. The movement of the composition is from right to left. Zephyr, the wind god, kidnaps and possesses the nymph Chloris, who becomes the goddess of spring, eternal bearer of life, the nymph of flowers. Her smile is unusual in paintings at this time. In the center, and somewhat set back from the other figures, stands Venus, dressed in red and blue, looking straight at the viewer. The trees behind her form a broken arch to draw the eye. In the air above her, a blindfolded Cupid aims his bow to the three Graces, a group of three females joining hands in a dance. At the extreme left, Mercury, god of commerce, messages, communications, travelers, luck, trickery, thieves, raises his wooden rod towards some wispy gray clouds, maybe to dissipate them. There are about 500 identified plant species depicted in the painting, with about 130 flowers that can be specifically identified. The overall appearance and size of the painting is similar to that of the mille fleurs, meaning thousand flower, Flemish tapestries that were popular decorations for palaces at the time. In The Birth of Venus, Venus is conceived from the union of the sea and the severed genitals of Uranus. The characters are presented against a brilliant blue-green backdrop of sea and sky. The meaning of the painting is straightforward, a scene from Greek mythology. On the left, Zephyr, the wind god, and Aura, the lighter breeze, bring Venus to the shore on a giant shell. On the right, Spring is ready with a cloak to cover Venus. To Botticelli, the elegance of the curve is more important than anatomical correctness, and this can be clearly seen in the shape of Venus. His work is arabesque. The way the bodies intertwine is dictated primarily by the demands of the composition. In the painting Lamentation of a Dead Christ, is God being depicted, or a lifeless body of a martyr? There is light radiating out of the youthful body, representing eternal life, a promise of resurrection. The sad expressions are a novelty in his art and may be influenced by Savonarola. This subject has been depicted by many different artists, and Mary is always present at Jesus' side in the scene, when in fact the central person in the Gospels is Mary Magdalene. She is at the foot of the cross as he's laid in the tomb, and the one who finds the tomb open and empty. Venus, the goddess of love, and Mars, the god of war. This painting was probably commissioned to celebrate the marriage, maybe with a sensual meaning, or maybe with the meaning that love outlasts war, since Mars is the one who fell asleep. Did they just make love? The lance and conch can be read as sexual symbols. The lovers are in a thicket of myrtle, a symbol associated with Venus and marriage. The wasps around Mars's head can signify pain that accompanies love, or simply be a symbol of the Vespucci family who may have commissioned this painting. Vespa is Italian for wasp. Unlike other nudes by Botticelli, Mars is perfect in proportions. The child of the reunion in Latin mythology is Cupid. Pallas and a centaur was made for the Medici family, and it's believed it was given by Lorenzo de' Medici for his cousin's wedding, so the two figures might represent a couple. Is wisdom subduing ignorance, or beauty subduing strength? This is a work of contrasts between horizontals and verticals, background and foreground, light and dark. Who gets the upper hand? Is Pallas restraining or caressing? What about the ship sailing with the shaft towards her belly? Is that the shaft that unites? Botticelli also painted a number of portraits, although not nearly as many as have been attributed to him. He also painted portraits in other works, as when he inserted a self-portrait and the Medicis into his early adoration of the Magi. Some believe if it were not for Leonardo da Vinci, Sandro Botticelli might have been the most significant artist associated with Renaissance.